Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest ghost and horror stories video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do another entry here. This one yet again from the reddit.com website, coming from the subreddit called Free Horror Stories. This one coming from a user by the name of Yumi130794, something that I wrote 2 years ago, and it has to do with yet again another supernatural encounter, in this case involving the apparent ghost of a deceased grandma, someone that visited this user and then was able to apparently communicate with them from the other side. Pretty interesting stuff when I was reading this information. Definitely makes me wonder if others who are listening to this video had a similar encounter, but here in this case they titled it as follows: Paranormal Ghost Story, Grandma Loves Me from the Other Side. So let's go ahead and let's share this information here, this story, and then I'll give my own thoughts on the matter afterward. So here's essentially what this user wrote. I am a 25-year-old female. For the purpose of anonymity, I will refer to myself as Sabrina. I am from Romania. English is not my native language, but I shall try my best to make the story easy to understand. My stories contain what you would call angels, spirits, demons, archangels, satanic people doing forbidden sessions of voodoo, and everything, but for this particular story, I sort of believe this is not necessarily a bad encounter, or so I lie to myself sometimes. There are many stories that I would love to share with you. You can either decide to share them, I don't mind, but mainly I just wish to talk with someone who has went through what I did and can understand and empathize with it based on your personal experiences. The one story that I can and will share for you now, I need time to think if I'm ready to share the less fortunate experience from now, but here it is. I live in Romania. Our country has Orthodox religion, basically very similar to Christianity, where we believe in God and Jesus Christ with small certain similarities and differences. For example, I don't know if it's the same as Catholics do, but we keep the deceased for a night. We call it the sleeping day or guard night. We do not take that body out of its house or the house he usually lived in their entire life in order to help the spirit find its way to heaven easier. And the next 2 days, as we bury the bodies after 3 days, we take the body to the church where the loved ones, but not relatives, to the deceased may come and then pay respects to that person. After this process concludes, we bury the body at the cemetery where the priest will chant prayers, helping the spirit of the deceased understand that he or she is no longer among the living. And as Romanians are very spiritual people and believe in the afterlife, spirits and even bad spirits that linger in the world are unable to move on. Understanding this is important as the story is pretty detailed itself. So I had 5 grandparents, 2 grandmothers, and then 3 grandmothers and 2 grandfathers. My first grandfather, we shall call him Michael, died when I was 6 due to a heart attack in August 2007. He raised me, and his death marked my life ever since because I couldn't grasp the significance of death. I would frequently dream about him, his messages, his signs. I would hear him in my dreams as he would guide me to be a good person and so on. But even then, as a child, I knew what was a dream and what was reality. His wife, whom we shall call Anna, was my adoptive grandmother, as my real by-blood grandmother, her name was Margaret, had died when my mom was 2 years old due to an abortion. I'm not sure if she was trying to abort my mother or a third child, since my mother has a brother and she was the second child, and this was during the communist years of around 1946, 1989. Romania had a strict law regarding abortions, and women could abort the fetuses on their own in the privacy of their home by themselves, as no medics would agree to help with the procedure due to fear of being sentenced to life in prison. So she died of septicemia, and my mother grew up without a mother until the age of 6 years old. Needless to say, I never met her or knew anything about Margaret, my blood grandmother. But this story is about my grandmother, my adoptive one, named Anna. She was a very spiritual, wise, kind-hearted, and intelligent woman. She never had children of her own. She adopted my mom and uncle. Their names aren't important for this story. And my grandfather, Michael, was only dating my grandmother, but after my mother had met her on a family visit on the other side, in Moldova, it's a town in Romania, they got married soon after. My grandfather was a military general that was raising two children of 6 years and 13 years, and that was hard. How they decided to get married? Well, it was thanks to my mother, because as soon as she first saw my grandma Anna, she went straight to her at the age of 6, raised her both arms up in the air, and asked in a jolly child voice, "Hi, my name is Christina. Would you like to be my mommy?" My grandmother burst into tears, picked her up, and then immediately created a connection with my mother, whom she raised and loved as her own. It was not the same for my uncle, as he was 13 at the time and knew his own mother, Margaret, how she died and why. He denounced her and made her life much, much harder. After raising my mom and uncle, my uncle had two children of his own, one a boy, one a girl. She raised the girl, and when the boy was born, she had a calcium crisis that made her faint and hit her head. She refused to raise my cousin afterwards, as she was afraid she would drop holding the baby. My uncle never forgave her for that and hated her even more. When I was born, I was the light of their life, as she loved my mother from moment one, and my grandfather Michael adored my mother. Because I'm a replica of my mother, same eyes, same face, same body shape, and so on, they immediately took me in and raised me, as my father worked in 3 different jobs, and my mom was a pediatric nurse and then worked in shifts. I loved growing up with her. Like I said, she was an extremely spiritual person. She loved to meditate. She would tell me about her dreams. She taught me how to decode them and what it meant. She told me about ghost encounters she had in her life, and always told me not to fear any spirit that comes close to my life, because ghosts see us as beams of light, guiding them to God when they are confused. Yes, that was my grandmother Anna for you. She did this until I was 18 years old. We were very close, and I was living 5 minutes away from her, so I would visit her daily, sometimes even sleep at her place. Her hobby was to read the future in some cards she had owned. Not tarot cards, but normal cards with some inscriptions she had, such as, "Encounter with mysterious man. Beware, crying child. Careful, dangerous woman." I can give you photos of the pack. It's just that the words are in Romanian, but I can translate them for you if you wish. Also, I would have to go to my parents' house, since I have moved from there, and the deck of cards remain there. On the New Year morning of 2017 at 3:15 a.m., I called my grandma Anna to wish her a happy new year and to let her know how much I and my family loved her and appreciate her. I'd like to mention that Romanians rarely express their love by saying "I love you" to our mothers, fathers, and grandparents. We consider that you show your love by what you do in your life and how you respect them, rather than just saying the words. But that night, for the first time in 20 years at least, at that time in 2017, I truly felt the need to tell her that, and I still don't know why. Her voice changed. You could hear her chuckle in soft, happy tears as she would hear that, and she said she loves us all back and forever will. Nothing seemed suspicious, as I'm a very sensitive and emotional woman myself, so the night went on normally. She was at a party, and I was at my fiance's house. The next day, January 1st, 2017, at about 5:30 p.m., I received a phone call from my father, who told me that Grandma Anna had died the previous night. I couldn't express in words how my heart simply left my body, as if my own existence stopped, refusing to acknowledge that she was dead. I rushed home. The police were there. The ambulance was there. They said that she died of a heart attack due to the climate change, same as my grandfather Michael did 11 years before. Then it was the same cause. Outside it was cold. Inside the house it was too hot, and she was rushing to change her clothes. Her heart couldn't handle this temperature change, and her body couldn't balance the heat, and so she died. But what I found particularly weird is the time of death. I still had her last phone call, 3:15 a.m. on my phone. The policeman and ambulance staff analyzed her and declared her time of death was around midnight. They said there was no way I could have talked to her at 3:15 a.m. as by that time the body would have already began the rigor mortis stage. So who did I talk to? Because it was her phone number, it was her voice, and she seemed incredibly fine. Call it a sick joke or just a medical staff time of death error, but this was creepy. During her funeral, I decided to write her a goodbye letter as I'm very spiritual, even though no one will read it, and I like to consider that she took the message I had for her to heaven to pass it down to my other grandmother, Margaret, and then two grandfathers, Michael and Peter. I wrote in that letter that I do love her a lot, that I thank her for every sacrifice she has done for me, and that I wish to tell Margaret, the real grandmother, which I never met because she died from an abortion long before I was born, that I love her too, although I never met her. I put that letter in my grandmother's coffin, kissed her forehead, and watched her go on her last road. My mom knows about the letter. She yet has asked me what I wrote in it. After her funeral, I got a phone call from my grandmother. Yes, my Nana Anna. At first, I thought it was my father, as he would still use her phone to let all her relatives from other countries know that she had died. So normally, I answered the phone and I hear something unimaginable, impossible, formidable. I hear my Nana Anna. I hear her voice clearly. I hear her laughly voice with intermittence and static occurring whenever she would pause. It was a soft, fading voice, but nothing scary, nothing fearful or intimidating. It made me feel like she was indeed there, but I will admit the whole situation did freak me out. She said, "Hello, dear. I called to let you know I passed the message and I love you too." I couldn't reply as the phone call simply hung up right afterward. It made me feel so vulnerable as I thought maybe someone was playing a sick joke, but it couldn't be that. I saw my Nana be buried herself. I saw the coffin be sealed, and I saw the letter exist inside the coffin until the very last second. No one took it out to read it, and she had three sisters, but they were all dead, and none of them had her voice. No one could have repeated her voice that perfectly. But even the scarier part comes after the first phone call. After another week, I remember it was during another Monday, all right, 1 week after the first phone call, my phone starts ringing again under the same number. I answer, already having forgotten what has happened before, and I hear an old lady, a voice I couldn't feel familiar, and I don't know who that lady was. It was pretty soft but strong, but it felt like a relatively young woman, but an experienced woman. I would say around 30 or 40 years of age or so. I would like to mention that at this time I was in the same room with my father, who owned her phone call, owned her phone still, and when I received the call, her phone was in front of me on the table and was not ringing. I opened her phone as I speak on the phone, and her phone had no battery and it was dead closed, but I still get that phone call. Strange, right? So I answer and I hear this weird lady and she goes something like this. "Hello, sweetheart. You don't know me, but I do. I received your message and I love you too." Then the phone call hangs up again. Needless to say, I started screaming and panicking so hard that my dad immediately went to the telephone service to find out who is playing pranks on us. They went through her profile, numbers dialed and received. My number was not in her agenda of calls, so we decided to disable that phone number. Ever since then, we do not receive calls anymore, but I do go to the cemetery more often and talk to them. This year is the first year from her death, so we are sort of celebrating her memory. But for me personally, I do not celebrate her memory as I feel she is constantly physically with me. I often have dreams of my grandma Anna. She would often visit me at nights. I'm saying dreams because I feel like I'm going insane if I ever conclude on these situations being something other than dreams. I guess I'm trying to thank you for giving me the possibility to share this with you. If you want to share my story further, to all the people out there who encounter ghosts or paranormal activity, I'm going to say what my grandmother Anna taught me all my life. Do not be afraid of them, as they are just confused, lost souls who see you as beams of light helping them to find God. The way you feel about them will conclude in the way they react, and afterwards may end up scaring you. And then that's pretty much it. That's the actual story. Long story, but still story associated from that user Yumi130794. Pretty interesting stuff, no? She laid out a lot of groundwork when it came to living there in Romania and then talking about the situation involving her multiple grandparents. All of it pretty much setting up the fact that Anna, her Nana, as she called her, was basically her adoptive grandmother, and the fact that she was in turn helping out her mother and then eventually being there for the actual user herself and teaching her about those interesting things involving spirituality, about ghosts, and then how to treat them, how they'll react to you, and so on. It was almost like a foregone an upfront conclusion when it comes to what this Anna would do afterward. But yeah, that was pretty freaky about the phone call in of itself, hearing that voice coming from her at 3:15 a.m. and then realizing that paramedics and others stating that no, she would have died earlier than that. It would have been hours before. So who indeed made that phone call, let alone the next phone call associated with, once again, her voice and then someone else apparently either doing a phone call on that same phone number or making a prank call as they were assuming afterwards. But who could that other person be otherwise? No explanation as to who got a hold of that sensitive information in the letter. Also the phone numbers and the voice, how they could be mimicked. So it just again leads you to believe that this is all 100% paranormal, just supernatural work at its play. Here you have a situation, not necessarily creepy, but still somebody, a relative, trying to communicate from the other side, realizing that yes, this person was going to be reached by that phone, and then having those encounters, at least to the point where they were finally switching phones and then making sure that it doesn't happen again. I've actually talked about that too in one of my past videos. I can't remember which one it was, but I definitely did talk about it. The fact that ghosts do seem to have their own guide, like they need guidance, like they need something in terms of somebody leading them from point A to point B, because they're stuck in that middle part. They're not exactly dead, but they're not exactly alive either. They're just trying to get out of their situation. And so pretty interesting that this grandmother Anna was able to teach her about this, about needing to help them find, as a, like if you're acting as a beaming light, needing to help them find their way out of their situation. And I was wondering if this is the case with Anna as well, or maybe that other mysterious person that ended up calling. Long story again, very detailed, but a lot of the groundwork was able to share, not just on the religious side, but also involving the relatives and how they acted throughout their life, leading up to eventually this user having those strange encounters with the supposed ghost of her grandma Anna. So, but let me know what you guys think about this story, and let me know if anyone else has had such an encounter with some relative or someone else. Definitely love to hear what your comments are below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.